Hello, this is Aki Nakamura from College of Image Arts and Sciences, Ritsumeikan University, and also a member of Ritsumeikan Center for Game Study. For that, I'd like to introduce you on what's the situation in Japanese digital game industry. Let's start from a global game trend in 2014 until 2020. From global perspective, the world experienced unprecedented growth of the game industries in 2020 due to the pandemic. It went over like 32% growth over the previous year. From that perspective, video game industry, particularly smartphone games and then handheld and console games had a great year in 2020. And then Asian market, which Japan is included, is a part of it, as they had a similar kind of growth experiences. Now let's take a look at the Japanese video game market, starting from so Japan's digital game industry trend. We had 2.17 trillion yen in 2020. It is true that arcade operations went down by 30%, but the rest of segments like console and handheld, also mobile game apps grew steadily. Now take a look at the console and handheld market in detail. So this is a figure from Family's White Paper 2021. They researched and then find out that the hardware had a growth of 16.4%, and the software had a growth of 9%. This is for the physical sales, but then digital sales of software went like a 93% growth compared to the amount from the past year. And overall, they had 33% growth comparing to 2019. So they had a tremendous year last year with 580 billion yen as a market figure. So this is a top 10 list of software that's been sold. Animal Crossing, New Horizons, Ring Fit Adventures, they're the top two with the Animal Horizons being 6.3 million units, and then Ring Fit Adventures being 1.5 million units being sold. And then that kind of really characterized what the pandemic was. Animal Crossing allow you to play through the internet with other friends. So, because of the fact that they had to stay home and not being able to do anything, so they were able to connect the people using online features and then share their rooms and stuff like that. And then the peaceful environment allowed them to play and they feel like they're not in like emergent situation like pandemic, right? And Ring Fit Adventure allow you to have exercise on your own, even during the pandemic. In the Momotaro Dentetsu is not familiar to most of people in the world, but then this is a classic games, digital games, which are based on kind of like a board game like game mechanics. So it is also a party game, and then a lot of people could play together. So this also allow you to have fun during the age of pandemic, and that shows how popular it became this year. In another series like a Pocket Monsters, Mario Kart 8, and Smash Brothers, they are sold before 2020, but then it went into considered as a popular titles in 2020 because it also have features to play with other friends over internet. So this kind of stuff allow you to overcome pandemic situations. Another trend you could see is this. So the Switch is a king. Out of 10 titles which are selected in 2020, 9 titles are for Switch. Only one title, which is the Final Fantasy VII Remake, made it to the top 10 list on 2020 most popular games with 949 and 379 units being sold. So if you look at the share for the video games, action-based game accounted for 35.5% of title which being sold during this time. So that's how popular action games is now. And here it says action adventures. Action adventure is also usually categorized as open world, like Assassin's Creed and all these games. Zelda also considered action adventures. So in other parts of the world, they considered as an open world game are categorized in action adventures. And also action role-playing games are played important roles, but then they are both heavily based on actions. So actions are now more important in this console and handheld market than others now. It used to be like a role-playing games. Role-playing game were dominated Japanese market for quite some time for handheld and console market as well, but now action seems to become more important. It is kind of natural considering the fact that smartphone games become so popular. Now the strength of console game lies in immersiveness of playing experience by hooking on to big TV screen and play it. And then that would give you a particular experience, and that shows on the tendency preference of genre now. Now let's take a look at the situation with hardware. 65.7% are Switch, and then 32.2% is PlayStation 4, and then just 2% accounted for PlayStation 5. Right now, it's here in figure it says about 500,000, but now Sony announced that PlayStation 5 reached 1 million in September. And then for the Switch, it reached 20 million by June. So the figure is getting bigger and bigger. Yes, PlayStation 4 stayed around same figure now because of the fact that PlayStation 5 keeps selling. But then these are the market currently on the mostly console games are sold now because of the fact that Switch are comparable to handheld as well. Okay, now let's move on and discuss about online mobile game market. Online mobile game market started as just 161 billion yen, but now in 2020 it reached 1.57 trillion yen. That's how big it became. Like, so in 10 years, the market size went over like almost 10 times. And then feature phones and other mobile phone is kind of almost like a died out because of the fact that the smartphone is kind of taking over all these functions for the entertainment. Now let's take a look at the game maps ranking. Most of them are role-playing games. You could look at it. Monster Strike, Fate Grand Order, Puzzle & Dragons, one of the first smartphone games which were launched in Japan and still popular, considered as one of the top 3. That's a puzzle role-playing game, right? And there's 2 titles from Chinese studio are now made it into top 10. One is Knives Out by NetEase. That's one of the game publisher giant in China. Another one is Yota Games, Mafia City. That's a city management type of games. So they all ranked into top 10. And then Pokemon Go's and then Dragon Quest Walk. These are like GPS-based game. They're also popular as well during the age of pandemic. The amount has been sold like the top one is going like 87 billion yen. So that's quite a bit of a amount sold. So that's how strong games market is now. Okay, now this is the genre. If you look at the genre, unlike the console and then handheld market, role-playing game really going to 46 titles. Role-playing games now it's quite diverse. Now, like with traditional role-playing games, they have action role-playing games, GPS-based role-playing games and puzzle-based role-playing game, and they call it even simulation-based role-playing game. So there's a variety to role-playing games. That's how popular the Japanese games is. And then action-related is 17 titles, and then usually popular MOBA in the rest of the world are part of it, but then the number is limited. Tower defense is also limited. Battle Royale, all these games which are considered quite popular in other parts of the world are part of it, but they're not as strong as in Japan. So that's the major difference between Japanese game market and the rest of the world. And now with that, we'll look into what the Korean company could do in Japan. First, so let's take a look at the platform strategy. In Japan, role-playing game is quite popular for smartphone devices. But then if you want to look into console or handheld market, let's consider action-based games. Even if your initial game genre is kind of role-playing game, make it to actions if you want to send it, if you want to sell it to console or handheld market, because that's the popular genre is. And then the popular genre is different depending on the platform you're selling. Another things you need to consider is to take a game to important indie studio exhibitions like Bit Summit and then Tokyo Game Show indie game sections. Apply it, and then if you get the pass, you can submit your works there. Or maybe you can collaborate with some of the Korean indie game association and then put their games in their booth so that people could still play the games. Usually these summit important figures from like a platform like Microsoft, Sony, or Nintendo will go there and actually play the games, and then the probably opportunity to negotiate. Another things you need to consider is having a strong local arm in Japan. And that's a key element for success in NetEase. NetEase has a strong presence in Japan, so they are localizing, or even you could call it culturalizing Knives Out. That's how Knives Out become really popular battle royale genre in Japan, despite the fact that the battle royale genre is not as popular as, let's say, other parts like China, Korea, or America. Another consideration that you need to think about is to make sure to have this synergy with other entertainment sector, because in Japan, media mix, or in Korea, it's called one source multi-use, is quite known. When they launch games, they usually launch with, like related to comics, or maybe sometimes animation comes out. Or in the past, the Korean company has done as well, like Ragnarok, because animations, and then other games by Nexon has done as well. Let's do that too for the future, particularly for the big studio I'm talking about, because in the studio, it's really hard to negotiate with a big entertainment company. But like a title like a Squid Games or Train to Busan, it's a zombie series in Korea. It's still popular, not only in Japan, but globally. So if you try to negotiate and try to create the games in association with them, and that will bring more opportunity for those guys who already like this franchise. Another possibility is collaborating with Korean celebrity like BTS, Twice, and other Korean pop stars. BTS already have games in the group, so I don't know if it's possible. But then there's other group which are popular also in Japan. And then for the female audience, let's do like puzzle, other stuff. For a male audience, let's do kind of like a love simulations or kind of a training simulations, stuff like that. And then with that possibilities, I think you can bring more games to the Japanese market. And that's it for today's presentation. Thank you very much.